a scope that you operate in. But before a relationship between a landlord and a tenant will even come up, there has to be an agreement.
Exactly.
Okay. Does the law spell out a typical agreement, or are the parties free to bring up whatever they want?
Okay.
So here is an example of what we think is a standard tenancy agreement, and we'll have that on the screen for us to peruse. If it's ready, can that be on, so that we'll have. And then we'll go through it. But what does the law say should be in a standard agreement?
Okay, so this question comes out, and it has been factored into the bill that we are preparing. We realize that the current tenancy agreement the Rent Act we are using does not factor in what we call the standardized tenancy agreement. So in the bill, we've input in there that the rent control department will come out with a standardized tenancy agreement. There cannot be a one tenancy agreement because premises varies in nature. There are some people who have everything. When I mean everything, it's well equipped. Everything is in there. Some people will just have a skeleton premises. So the standardized tenancy agreement that we are coming with will be a sample or a template of which, when you look at it, you should be able to factor in that to suit your premises. And drafting a tenancy agreement, which is the responsibility of the landlord, should factor in our constitution, should factor in the Rent Act as and when it comes, and then should also factor in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Because in drafting the tenancy agreement, it shouldn't be that you are going to impose something on somebody. The fact that the person has paid you money, you are going to infringe on the person's human right. So in drafting the tenancy agreement, you have to factor in all those laws that governs rental and then human rights.
Okay, so yeah. I talked about what we came across. So we think it's a tenancy agreement, and you are the expert here. So as we go through all the points that we'll be showing on the screen, you can tell us if that is agreeable or not per what is on there. So we'll put it on the screen now and I'll read it out. So here's an example of a tenancy agreement. The landlord agrees to let the tenant take a 2-bedroom apartment. I think we have some mistake there. 2-bedroom apartment for the period of 1 year, starting from 15th May 2025 to 14th May 2026. And that tenant has paid rent advance of 12,000 Ghana cedis. The month rent is 1,000 Ghana cedis, and the tenant has made a security payment of 2,000. But if the tenant damages any part of the property beyond the security amount, he or she shall pay the remainder amount. Mr. Pasu, do these, so far, the first 3 points that we've raised, do they have the backing of the law?
Yes. So the second does not back by law.
The second is not backed by law.
Yes, it's not backed by law in the sense that our current act requests or require that a landlord has no right to demand more than 6 months rent advance.
Okay, so let's go back to that point. So in this agreement, the tenant has paid 12,000 cedis, and it's saying that every month is 1,000. So point 2 is not backed by law.
Yeah, it's not backed by law in 2 folds. The law as we have now requires that the landlord has no right to demand more than 6 months rent advance. But there's nothing that prevents the landlord from collecting 1 year rent advance. So in this case, if the tenant has willingly opted to pay 1 year rent advance, then it's correct.
I don't know any tenant that has willingly offered to pay 1 year or 2 years rent advance, because the landlords demand the money, and I'm sure you are aware of that.
Yes, you may be right, but you see, because of the housing deficit, a lot of people are chasing one room or one premises. And I always say that implementation of the law is a collective responsibility, in the sense that if all tenants will stand on their grounds that we are not going to pay more than 6 months rent advance, then we can achieve that clause in the law. But when you are negotiating, let's say tenant A is negotiating for 6 months, his fellow tenant will be standing at the back of him or her, signaling the landlord because of the housing deficit that I have more. So there will be a situation, though we hear of people going beyond the 6 months, but sometimes we blame the tenants as well, because they are chasing the same premises. And because one will have an upper hand, he will be signaling the landlord that I can pay 1 year, I can pay 2 years.
The landlords are demanding, they
yes.
are asking for 1 year. And some people even, like you're saying, the tenants offer and say, if you're even asking for this 1 year, I will pay 2.
Okay.
So they are asking for 1 or 2 years rent in the first case.
Yes.
So it's not the tenants.
We've seen this gap in the law, and we want to cure it. So in the bill, we want to cut at a certain. We are increasing it to 1 year because of the investment landlords are paying, and what we've input in there, if it's passed, that if a landlord collects more than the agreed period, which is the 1 year, whether you collect or you demand, it will be an offense on both sides. So because of the gap, we are making sure that we'll bridge the gap.
But wouldn't that be difficult to prove in a rent court if those exist? This demanding and collecting, where's the burden of proof?
No, so the issue now it will be difficult. But when the new law comes into effect and you collect 1 year, 1 month, whether you collect or not, whether you demand or you collect beyond the 1 year as we have proposed, then there will be proof, because you issue receipts, you sign this tenancy agreement. So when you see in the tenancy agreement that tenant has paid 2 years, then it constitutes an offense.
So who is offending here? Is it the landlord or
it's
the tenant
the landlord
who has paid?
So you, the landlord, will come and prove that I didn't demand it, but it's the tenant who offered.
I mean, if you're a landlord, how do you prove that you didn't demand this money from your landlord? But we'll get there. So there's that 2 years, 1 year to 2 years demand that people get into. Now there's a security deposit, which was 0.3.